we've talked about the 3 principles enumerated by Dr. Price. Now we're going into some that we have added based on lots and lots of research of traditional cultures. The 4th principle has to do with cooking. Should we cook our food? And the answer is yes, this is what human beings do. We do cook our food, especially grains and plant foods. Cellulose is impossible to digest unless it's broken down by cooking. All cultures cook their food, but they all also ate some of their animal foods raw. Not all raw, and I'm very concerned about this movement to have all raw meat, all raw animal foods, because they also cooked their foods. Cooking makes the proteins in animal foods more available to us. But there are good reasons to eat some raw animal foods. So examples of raw animal foods include raw milk, butter, and cream, raw cheeses, raw and marinated fish, raw shellfish like oysters, and traditional ethnic raw meat dishes such as steak tartare, carpaccio, and kibbeh, which is raw lamb from the Middle East. I'm intrigued by the fact that every country in Europe has at least one raw animal food that's eaten occasionally. Not all the time, but they do eat raw meat occasionally. And I think one of the reasons that we do need raw animal foods is to get B6. Vitamin B6 is very fragile. It's easily destroyed by heat. And B6 deficiency is linked to so many of our diseases: diabetes and heart disease, nervous disorders, cancer, kidney disease, asthma, all kinds of pregnancy problems. B6 deficiency is very much linked to alcoholism, and the alcoholic who's trying to recover needs to eat a lot of raw animal food, raw meat. Sickle cell anemia, even carpal tunnel syndrome is associated with B6 deficiency. At the same time, a lot of things become more available when they're cooked. I believe that the iron in meat is liberated by cooking. I've seen people become anemic from eating only raw meat, even though the iron is in there. So we want to eat our meat in both ways, both cooked and raw. So to cook or not to cook, meat and seafood, both, raw and cooked. Dairy food should never be heated. So raw or fermented. Grains, we'll talk about grains. They're soured first and then always cooked. Fruits, raw and cooked. I'm one who cannot tolerate a lot of raw fruit, but if it's cooked, I'm fine. And vegetables should be mostly cooked. There's very few vegetables that we can eat raw. The tender salad vegetables like lettuce, cucumbers, tomatoes, that's fine. But things like kale, spinach, beans, potatoes, these all need to be cooked. Otherwise, they're toxic to us. And this gets me into my favorite subject, that of raw milk. I'm going to race through these slides because we have been told that raw milk is this terribly dangerous food that we should never, ever touch. That's the message coming out from the federal government. So what does that tell you? They're wrong, right? They're always wrong, okay? Raw milk is actually uniquely safe. Consider the calf born in the muck. First thing he does is get up and suckle on his mother's manure-covered teat. How can that calf possibly survive? How has any mammal survived with such a dirty system, you know? And that's because raw milk contains multiple redundant systems of bioactive components that reduce or eliminate pathogenic bacteria. So it has lactoperoxidase. This is an enzyme that uses hydrogen peroxide to destroy pathogens. And it's in all animal milk. It's higher in animal milk than human milk. And then these twin sister of lactoperoxidase is lactoferrin, which steals iron away from pathogens. Pathogens love iron. That's why you get pathogens where there's a lot of rust, for example. Pathogens love iron, and what lactoferrin do is ensures that the baby absorbs all the iron so the pathogens don't have any iron to grow on, but it also does a double duty, ensures that the baby absorbs all that iron and doesn't become anemic. Raw milk contains all the components of blood. neutrophils, lymphocytes, immunoglobulins. In fact, in World War I, they used raw milk for blood transfusions. It contains everything that's in blood except red blood cells. And so what raw milk does for the infant, it builds the immune system for the infant. Special fats and carbohydrates, oligosaccharides, for example. When they discovered oligosaccharides in raw milk, they thought, well, nature probably made a mistake because we can't digest oligosaccharides. But what does digest oligosaccharides? Friendly gut bacteria, right? And many other components, mucins, which keep the bad guys from sticking to the intestinal wall, hormones and growth factors. I mean, every year we're discovering new factors in raw milk that protect the infant, help build a healthy gut wall, and ensure the assimilation of all the nutrients. Beneficial bacteria, bifidus factor, B12 binding program, protein ensures that the infant absorbs all the B12. Lactoglobulins, which adhere to A and D and ensure their full assimilation. So this is a five-fold protective system. 1, it destroys pathogens. 2, it stimulates the immune system. 3, builds a healthy gut wall. 4, prevents the absorption of pathogens and toxins. And 5, assures the assimilation of all the nutrients. And all of these are destroyed by pasteurization. Yeah. They're mostly reduced in pasteurized milk, completely in ultra-pasteurized milk, and most milk today is ultra-pasteurized, including organic milk. And look at infant formula. You know, there's this myth that infant formula is safe. It is very unsafe. There have been lots of illnesses and many deaths from infected infant formula. And yet they have the gall to criticize raw milk, which as far as I know hasn't caused a death in 30 years. So this is a lot of small print, but just, you know, if you have time to read all this later, just shows what happens to all these nutrients when the milk is pasteurized. Vitamin C is destroyed, B6 is destroyed, the others are not very well absorbed. Every vitamin and mineral in raw milk has a special enzyme that ensures it is 100% absorbed. No other food is like this. And when you pasteurize, then your body has to produce these enzymes, and it's a big stress and it takes a lot of energy. Dairy itself is a very safe food. Even pasteurized dairy is safe and raw dairy is safe. The most unsafe food is fish and shellfish, which oysters cause 30 deaths a year. You get 30 deaths a year from raw oysters. Yet you can still buy raw oysters, right? Why is that? Because politicians eat oysters, you know? And they're not going to let the FDA take away oysters. So as soon as enough politicians have seen their children or grandchildren benefit from raw milk, we'll have raw milk everywhere. And there have been many, many outbreaks from pasteurized milk. The most recent, 2007, there were 3 deaths from fully pasteurized milk in Massachusetts. The health officials say that the reason we've had the decline in all these infectious diseases is because we pasteurize our milk. But here is a graph going back to 1900. You can see the decline in bacteria and diphtheria, whooping cough, measles, etc. Mandatory pasteurization was instituted in 1948. So all of these diseases had mostly disappeared before mandatory pasteurization. And as I said, there have been lots of illnesses from other foods. Actually, oysters was 15 deaths per year. Eggs were 30 deaths per year from eggs. We still can buy eggs, right? So in summary, raw milk is actually the safest food. It's safer than any other food. It has its own built-in safety mechanisms. Claims that raw milk is unsafe are based on 40-year-old science and would not hold up in a court of law. Meanwhile, pasteurized milk is causing increasing health problems in our children. especially associated with allergies and asthma and frequent ear infections. If a child has frequent ear infections, the doctor says take him off of milk, because pasteurized milk is just not healthy. It's very allergenic. This is lactoferrin. This is what the proteins in raw milk look like. They're very complicated, three-dimensional proteins. They're very fragile. And when you pasteurize, it's like bringing your hands down on a bunch of Tinker Toys. Well, somebody asked me after a talk, what are Tinker Toys? So people don't remember. Like bringing your hands down on a bunch of Legos, okay? And what happens with pasteurization is a rapid heating, and the proteins are flattened. And then your body says, this is a foreign protein. It has to mount an immune response. And this accounts for the allergies, the immune diseases later in life, juvenile diabetes, etc. So raw milk digests itself. Your body doesn't have to make any enzymes, doesn't have to do anything to digest milk. Once milk gets into the alkaline pH of the small intestine, the enzymes are activated by that pH and they digest the milk for you. Whereas pasteurized milk is very difficult to digest, requires a lot of energy and enzymes that your body has to make. Very interesting studies done in the late 1930s. The rat on top was given only raw milk, a very robust rat. Good fur, good development. The ones below were given pasteurized milk. They had hairless areas due to B6 deficiency, and they had very poor development. They were very scrawny. And then they looked at the bones. The pasteurized milk rats had longer bones and much denser bones. They were 206 grams compared to 146 grams. So there was the same amount of calcium in both the raw and pasteurized milk, right? But what happens? It's much more easily absorbed in the raw milk, and it goes to the bones and the teeth. And we've been talking this morning about bone structure, getting these strong bones in the face. We are lucky in America that we are a dairy country, and now raw milk is so widely available. And I think it's a very important component of the diet of growing children. And these were guinea pig studies. This shows where that calcium goes when it doesn't go to the bones and teeth. So the ones on whole raw milk had excellent growth, no abnormalities. Those on whole pasteurized milk, poor growth, muscle stiffness, emaciation and weakness. They died within a year, and when they did an autopsy, they found the calcium in the soft tissues, streaked in the heart and joints, and they didn't say arteries, but that's what atherosclerosis is. It's calcium in the arteries. And when pasteurization first came in, there were doctors saying this is causing atherosclerosis, the pasteurized milk. And it's my favorite study, 1931, Ohio State University, still doing good research in those days. The rats on whole raw milk had good growth, sleek coats, clear eyes, and they were nice little rats. They enjoyed being picked up and petted by the researchers. The ones on pasteurized milk had rough coats, slow growth, their eyes lackluster. They were anemic. Why would they be anemic? There's the same amount of iron in raw and pasteurized milk. But the lactoferrin is destroyed, so they're not absorbing the iron, okay? And they were very irritable. When they were picked up by the researchers, they tended to bite, okay? So I've had many, many parents tell me, oh, we just made one change. We switched from pasteurized to raw milk, and I can't believe how my kids have changed. They're so much nicer. They don't get in trouble. They're doing better in school. You know, I really didn't like my kids until we put them on raw milk. So you'll see a big improvement in the behavior of your children if you get them on raw milk. And since ancient times, they used raw milk as like a fasting diet to cure many diseases. This is what the Mayo Clinic was set up for, the raw milk diet. They called it the milk cure. Many studies have shown that raw milk protects against asthma, especially if it started in the very young years. And asthma kills 9 people a day in this country, many of them children. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had something that prevented asthma?